What's up, friends? Welcome back to the Pack a Day podcast. I'm your host, Andy Herman. You can follow me on Twitter at Andy Herman NFL. We are going to take a break from our wide receiver breakdowns today. They will be back tomorrow, I promise. But I want to talk a little bit about a couple of the top defensive linemen in this draft because, yes, it is not completely unthinkable that the Packers could go defensive linemen in round one. And I want to talk about the two big guys from Georgia because they're a lot of fun to discuss. And they just might make really fun tag team partners with Kenny Clark as well. So let's go over Jordan Davis and Devonte Wyatt, two University of Georgia defensive linemen who are likely to go in the top 20 of this draft. Could either actually be in play for Green Bay at pick 22. Maybe, maybe not. I know there's going to be some people that are listening to this that will guarantee me that, that Jordan Davis is going to go, top 12-ish, and that Devonte Wyatt will probably go top 20. And both of those things could unequivocally be true, and both could be off the board well before pick 22. And I think it is actually likely that Green Bay does not trade up for either of these players just based on where they're at with the defensive line right now. However, if one of these players does get to pick 22, I think either definitely could be in play for the Packers. So I do think it is still worthwhile to discuss both of these players because as this next month goes along, or 3.5 weeks, whatever it is now, things change. Like, you will all of a sudden find out that a player that's been talked about in the top 15 is now being talked about in the bottom 30. A couple of players that are talked about as second rounders will all of a sudden move up into the top 15. These things tend to move over time. It wouldn't shock me at all if either Wyatt or Davis, I don't think both will be there. I think that would be very surprising. But if one of them were there at pick 22, would not be shocked about that at all. So could either be in play. Maybe. We'll have to sort of take a wait and see approach. Both definitely could be off the board by pick 20. But remember here, as we start thinking about what players Green Bay may take, and I know everyone is hyper focused and just basically possessed by the wide receiver position at this point. Remember that with Green Bay's first pick, going all the way back a long time now, a long time, they prefer premium position players with that first pick. I'm not talking Darnell Savage as a first rounder. I'm not talking first rounders. I'm talking their first pick. Remember, Rashawn Gary was taken over Darnell Savage in that draft. But with that first pick in the draft, what they tend to value is quarterback, offensive tackle, defensive lineman, edge rusher, or cornerback. Generally, it's going to be one of those players. They have valued those positions much higher when they're taking a player with their first pick in the draft. So defensive lineman definitely within that. And again, it wouldn't shock me at all if Green Bay decided to go defensive lineman. And the other thing I want to note here really quick, right? If you're looking at the long term, because a lot of times Green Bay is looking at not just this year. It's a little bit of a different time period where they're looking very heavily at this year as well, but they're looking at the future of the position as well. Dean Lowry probably on his last year. Maybe he gets another contract, but probably on his last year. Jerron Reed is basically like a one-year flyer, and you're not making any decisions based off of him. And yes, Kenny Clark's going to be here a while, and you're hopeful that TJ Slayton's going to progress, but he's a fifth-round pick. Outside of that, it's Jack Heflin, who's an undrafted free agent. You're not basing any decisions on anyone on this roster right now outside of Kenny Clark, and there's only one of him. So yes, you would still like to develop that defensive line position. We know that Green Bay values it. We know that this is a position that, again, if you're looking at first overall picks that they've, not like number one overall pick, but their first pick in given drafts, that defensive lineman is a position that they definitely value. And the presence of Kenny Clark here is also important because for a lot of teams, the difference between Jordan Davis and Devonte Wyatt very much could come down to what type of defense they're running, what type of player type that they like, and also the presence of what they have on their roster already. If they've got a big run-stuffing defensive tackle, they may prefer a Devonte Wyatt. If they've got a pass rusher already, they may prefer a Jordan Davis. But the presence of Kenny Clark makes this very interesting that either player could definitely work. If you want Kenny Clark to be sort of the smaller of the two next to Jordan Davis, he can do that. He can be a little bit more of your sort of three technique player and be the guy that tries to get upfield a little bit more. I'm not saying that's his bread and butter. I'm not saying that that's ideally what you use him at. He's never going to be that like quick penetrating guy. He's always going to be a little bit more of a slow burn, but you don't mind playing Jordan Davis and Kenny Clark together. That's not a problem at all. You would love that problem to have as a defensive coordinator. Meanwhile, if you want Kenny Clark to be more your run stuffer and more your dominant defensive force in the middle of the defense and add a Devonte Wyatt who can be more of a penetrator, you can do that as well. So the presence of Kenny Clark here really opens things up to be able to draft either of these players and pair them together moving forward because of Kenny Clark's unique versatility on the interior of the defensive line. So let's get into our scouting reports for both players. I want to start first with Devonte Wyatt. Again, senior, University of Georgia, 6'3", 304, just turned 24 in March. An elite RAS score, relative athletic score. Again, super athlete here. 9.56 relative athletic score on the defensive line, solid size, vertical jump of 29, which was about 58th percentile, 86th percentile broad, 99th percentile 40-yard dash, 99th percentile 10-yard split, 63rd percentile short shuttle, and 83rd percentile 3-cone. Just literally checking every single box from an athletic standpoint. Didn't do the bench press, but other than that, an elite score from a relative athletic score standpoint, and just an elite athlete regardless of which way you want to look at it. So let's take a look at his positives first. I love, and I mean love, his initial quickness and his lateral agility. His ability to move to the side and then immediately burst upfield is special. He has a massively quick first step. He has an explosivity that makes him a very unique player at defensive tackle. His ability to get up the field and penetrate from the middle of the offensive line up into the quarterback or the running back makes him a pure disruptor along the defensive front. And we all know that every team is looking for that Aaron Donald-esque player. Now, do not get me wrong. I am not comparing Wyatt to Aaron Donald. That would be ridiculous. But teams are more focused now on what's the quickest way from point A to point B. And more often than not, that is right up the middle, either right over center, right over guard. Not an edge rusher who has to loop around and kind of come back to the quarterback or even try to go through the tackles to the quarterback. If somebody can win with quickness against guards and centers on the inside, that is the fastest way to blow up a play, the fastest way to make a quarterback uncomfortable, and the fastest way to make a running back either have to bounce outside or just run right into a tackle, right? So that is what teams are coveting, and Devonte Wyatt has that in spades. Also, his quickness isn't just limited to like straight line speed. Again, he has really great agility. I'm not saying he has like Devondre Campbell's like change of direction ability here, but his ability to move in space, like they used him as a quarterback spy. This is a 300-pound player that they have utilized as a quarterback spy at the University of Georgia, and they utilized him in that position successfully. That's the type of athlete this guy is. So no, he's not exactly moving like a linebacker, but for his size, like you see him drop and move laterally like you would see a linebacker do. It is really crazy to watch, and it's a very unique trait for him to have. And again, the change of direction for defensive linemen is really, really good, and it shows up most when he's using that lateral quickness and then that burst upfield to shoot into gaps. And oh, by the way, a massively quick first step too, which sets him up. What you want as an offensive lineman or a defensive lineman, you want to be the first one up, and you want to be able to sort of get to your spot and start attacking the opposing player first, because we all know that the hand usage and how your feet are set is going to determine how that battle is going to go. And Wyatt's ability to get up out of his stance and even move laterally to his side. Like you will see plays where he is up and in the gap over before the offensive lineman is up and totally in their stance. That is a rare trait to have and something that will serve him incredibly well at the NFL level. And as I mentioned, teams wanting that Aaron Donald-esque player, he is a pure disruptor. Now, there's a couple different ways that you can win, and I love Kenny Clark, right? So Kenny Clark isn't going to be that quick first step and rush up the middle and disrupt everything. That's not his game. That's not his style. Now, You will see it every once in a great while from Clark, but what Clark's going to do is he's going to get under you and he's going to shove you back either into the quarterback and reset that line of scrimmage. So Kenny Clark almost doesn't matter like that offensive lineman is between you and the running back or you and the quarterback. He knows that if he forklifts you as an offensive lineman and pushes you 6 yards into the backfield, that's basically the same as the penetration, because the quarterback's going to be all out of whack. The running back's going to have to figure out something else to do. He is completely disrupting that play, but it's in a totally different vein from what a Devonte Wyatt does. Devonte Wyatt is going to win with that quick first step and that explosivity, and he is going to win and attack gaps with haste. And he does it very, very quickly, and before you even blink, he can be there. Now, I'm not saying that this is like something that happens on every single play. There are going to be plays where he loses that momentum or he just doesn't have that quick first step or the offensive lineman gets out of their stance, but he is a pain in the butt to have to go against if you're an offensive lineman, because you know at some point during that game, he is just probably going to have that quick first step, relocate to a different gap, shoot the gap, and make a play in the backfield. And especially if you're a center that's having to snap the ball and then get up, it's just an absolute nightmare to have to do. So if you're an offensive lineman, Devonte Wyatt is not somebody you want to see across from you. And that's always a very great trait to have if you're looking to gain somebody on your defensive line or anywhere on the field. One of my favorite things to do as I'm scouting a player is to look at the player across from them and see what type of day they're having. And you can see some offensive linemen are having some very painful days going against Devonte Wyatt because of his quick first step and his disruptive ability. He also flashes hand usage to really keep offensive linemen at bay and to be able to use that quick first step and that explosiveness and his speed and agility to his advantage, because it's not all that different from what we've been talking about, a physical cornerback being able to press on a wide receiver and then the wide receiver doesn't have that agility or the ability to get out of their breaks as crisp, right? So same thing on the defensive line. If you're not getting your hands off or their hands off of you, they're going to be leaning on you and grabbing you and doing everything else they can to disrupt your ability to get up the field. And now I don't care how quick or fast you are, if they're controlling you, it's game over, right? So his ability to use his hands and get the opposing player's hands off of him and then use that explosiveness to get up the field is going to serve him very well. It's not consistent yet, but he shows flashes of it. And if he continues to utilize that, again, that will be a major weapon in the NFL. Love the fact that he plays with solid pad level and leverage. Again, he has sort of that, stout, squat, square frame. That's a good thing. We'll talk about Jordan Davis in just a moment and almost being oversized. Like, you want a little bit of a low center of gravity, your ability to kind of stay low to the ground, anchor if you need to, and again, not maybe have balance issues or leverage issues. We'll always talk about low man winning when it comes to offensive line, defensive line play. Well, if you're a little bit more lower to the ground, great center of gravity, and can anchor and all those sort of things, you're going to have a better opportunity to win with more consistency. And his size really fits well. And again, it allows him to play with solid pad level, and he understands leverage because of that as well. I also think he does a really good job of understanding angles. If you're going to be somebody that shoots gaps and, I'll say this as well, not only shoots gaps, but does twists and stunts and will push out to the edge and just win in a variety of different ways, you better understand how to use angles to your advantage. And again, that is something that Devonte Wyatt has as well. And that was really my next point as well, is something that shows up is his ability to win with twists and stunts. So a lot of times what will happen, think about these Tyler Lancaster, Dean Lowry, and Dean Lowry can do it from time to time, but Lancaster, Lowry type players, and you're trying to like twist and stunt, even like a TJ Slayton, right? You're trying to twist and stunt with these players. Man, by the time Lancaster or even Slayton get around on those twists and stunts, like the quarterback's got the ball out of his hands. Like you're almost doing a disservice to yourself by running those sometimes with slower level players. But you got Kenny Clark, Rashawn Gary, and then Wyatt and, I don't know, whoever else you want to put there, Preston Smith, you put those four up on the defensive line running twists and stunts in games. I mean, look the heck out. Wyatt is going to have a level of explosiveness. If Rashawn Gary has that, Kenny Clark and Preston Smith can be used more as the bull rushers to free Gary and Wyatt up. Just the possibilities are endless. So I think he would make a very good fit for that reason as well. I also love the fact that he has great football intelligence, great FBI, if you will. understand, like there are plays on tape where you will see him blow up screens and just have great awareness that, all right, the offensive lineman's doing something different. I need to be aware of my surroundings and check the screenplay. And then he has great eyes too. When he's trying to like find the right gap and like hold up at the point of attack, his eyes are always up. They're always focused on what's going on, and he doesn't lose focus, whether it's a play action, pass, run, whatever. He's always very aware, and you can tell he has great football intelligence overall. I also feel like he does, and we talked a lot about pass rush so far, right? He's not going to be your ideal run defender, but he holds his ground in one-on-one battles in the run game. And I think that's going to, again, be something that maybe he's never going to excel at as a run defender. He's going to always, I think, excel more as a pass rusher, but he's good enough as a run defender that he's not a liability. He's not somebody that's moved easily, and he can hold up in one-on-ones. He flashes the ability to hold up against double teams every once in a great while. I think in the NFL, that's going to be something that's a lot harder for him, but I don't have a concern here. Like if you're asking me, like Green Bay's going a lot with like Dean Lowry as their number 2 defensive lineman, right? I would expect Wyatt to hold up better as a run defender than a Dean Lowry, even with his skill set. Maybe not right away, but over time, I think that's something that he has the ability to do. Go watch his first play against Auburn, and you will see him beat a double team, make a tackle. So he flashes that ability. But again, I don't think run defense is ever going to be his 1A thing, but it's good enough that you don't have to worry about it either. He has some versatility to play a little bit on the outside. We've seen both Mike Pettin and Joe Barry line up like a Kenny Clark on the edge every once in a great while, more as like a pocket collapser or in those twists and stunts, as I mentioned earlier. Wyatt would have the ability to do some of that as well. His effort is phenomenal. I think just about every defensive lineman you talk about, there's always some note of like, oh, did he take a play off here or there? Not a concern with Wyatt. Shows the ability to recover when beat. Even when an offensive lineman does beat him, he can quickly recover because of his speed, like and just his football intelligence almost lulls you to sleep, and then just wins with his hands, disengages, and goes and makes a play. And then he plays assignment sure football. I'll get to a negative on that side of things in a moment, but overall, he's very aware of what his job is on a play, and he goes out and executes what's expected to him, what's expected of him, even if that's not the flashiest, sexiest thing. So that's another thing that you really want out of a defensive lineman, especially a pass rushing, penetrating defensive lineman who you know is licking their chops to get upfield and make that explosive play in the backfield. Now, what are his weaknesses? He's 24 years old. So there's limited growth potential here. Green Bay generally prefers younger players, especially in the first round of the draft. Now, Green Bay wants players to be able to come in and be successful, and somebody who's 24 and a little bit more developed and has already shown all these great traits on tape, you're probably a little bit more willing to have some accident forgiveness, but it's just going to limit his overall growth potential, right? Somebody who's 21, 22 years old still has a couple years to really develop, and especially at the NFL level, Wyatt is probably going to have maybe a year to, that second year jump probably becomes a little bit more important for him. But ultimately what you see might be what you get at this point. Now, we already talked about, right? He's already showing production at Georgia against teams like Alabama, against really good offensive linemen, and his athletic traits are off the charts. So he doesn't need to develop all that much more. But again, Green Bay has very much valued younger players, and the growth potential is definitely going to be a little bit of an issue. In comparison, Kenny Clark is 26 years old right now, and he has 6 years of NFL experience. Wyatt will be 24, or already is 24, and 24 in his rookie year. So not a lot of growth potential there. He's not somebody, as I mentioned earlier, that's going to reset the line of scrimmage very often. He's not going to just, forklift players and push them into the backfield. He's more going to win with agility, with speed, with finesse, basically more than he's going to win with power. That first step, that quick first step and explosiveness upfield, his momentum can be used against him at times, and offensive linemen will just kind of shove him to the side or let him go past, and you can trap him. You can do a variety of different things. So he's got to be a little bit more assignment sure when it comes to that. You'd like to see him develop a little bit more of a violent punch and consistent hand usage, bull rush, and the ability to get under players' pads. And again, not necessarily fully reset the line of scrimmage, but just get them back a little bit more and collapse the pocket a little bit more. He can be a little bit too finesse at times. You'd like to see a little bit more physicality. Doesn't have great length. And again, his pass rush plan can need work. He's winning with that first step. You'll see an arm over. You'll see a spin move. You'll see a variety of different things. But it's not necessarily that he doesn't have the moves or the move set, but just how you're stringing those together and having a pass rush plan is something that could be beneficial as well. All right, let's move to Jordan Davis. Jordan Davis, totally different player. Senior, also from University of Georgia, 6'6", 341. He just turned 22 in January, so a big difference there in age. So a lot of the reason why Davis may go ahead of Wyatt is the fact that, again, Wyatt is 24. What you see might be what you get. Davis is already this freak 6'6" athlete. He's already doing incredible things, and he's still only 22 years old and just turned 22 in January. So there's more upside and more potential for growth there with Jordan Davis. Speaking of those athletic scores, a 10.0, a perfect 10 for Jordan Davis. Now, he didn't run the short shuttle, didn't run the 3-cone, and didn't bench press. I can guarantee you if he ran the short shuttle and the 3-cone, that perfect 10 score would definitely come down. But 99th percentile height, 97th percentile weight, 88th percentile vert, 99th percentile broad jump, 99th percentile 40-yard dash, 98th percentile 10-yard split. Just off the charts athleticism, especially for a 6'6", 341-pound defensive lineman. And my biggest strength here with Jordan Davis, God did not create many humans like Jordan Davis ever, much less in the NFL right now. I'm talking about ever. 6'6", 341 pounds with a 4.78 40, a 99th percentile broad jump, an 88th percentile vertical. He is insanely athletic. It is stupid what he can do at his size and his strength and his length. It is unbelievable. And there comes a point, especially on the defensive line, edge rusher to some extent, but especially on the defensive line, where you just take these rare, insane players that are just size, speed, strength, brute forces. And that's what Jordan Davis is. We'll talk about some of the tape being left to be desired. We'll talk about some of the athletic traits that he doesn't have. There just aren't human beings like this on earth. And when you have the opportunity to take one, you probably should take one. And again, he just turned 22 years old, an absolute freak of nature in all the best ways possible. Absolute rare quickness for his size. His first step is far quicker than it has any humanly right to be. And I don't know what your plan is as an offensive lineman against Jordan Davis. And if he develops and even comes remotely close to reaching his upside, you have a player that that offensive coordinators will have to legitimately game plan against, because you're not going to have a perfect, a perfect game plan for him without, even if you do take the time to develop a game, there's just not going to be a perfect plan for a player like that. So the upside is insanely special. And I mean insanely special. Stack and shed ability. I don't care if you've got two defense or offensive linemen. He has the ability to stack those offensive linemen, shed, get off, and go make a play. Again, with a level of quickness that is, there's no better word for it than absolutely absurd. He has that rare ability to reset the line of scrimmage. You put Kenny Clark and Jordan Davis next to each other. Again, I don't know what your plan is as an offensive line. Those are two guys that are going to blow up. And then you've got Rashawn Gary and Preston Smith at the edge. Look out. Again, this is why this guy is probably going to go in the top 15, likely to go in the top 15, but we'll get to why he may not in just a moment. Size, power, strength, run defense. You're not moving this guy. And he's not exactly the player that you would expect. He does actually like to win with finesse a little bit more often than you would maybe think. But he does have that power too. And I think he's actually going to develop that power more as time goes on. And he realizes that he's just this behemoth in the middle of the defensive line and people aren't going to be able to move him. And I think he's going to start using that to his advantage even more than he already has at the University of Georgia. He has the ability to actually become a disruptor. His quick first step and his ability to get up the field and that quickness, he's not limited by being 6'6", 340. He can legitimately become not just a guy that is a slow burn, I'm going to bench press you into the backfield, but also actually win with quickness as well, which again, with his size and strength, is a very rare attribute. His hands are not only fast, but they're accurate. quick hands are great, but if you're placing them all over the place and not getting them where you need to, not hitting your targets, you might as well not have hands. Like, that's how important it is to not only have fast hands, but accurate hands. He has both of them. And again, I mentioned earlier, like, what's your plan as an offensive lineman against this guy if he even comes remotely close to reaching his ceiling? And again, he can absolutely develop into a player that teams have to completely game plan and scheme around, to the point where if you've got Jordan Davis and Kenny Clark in the middle of the defense, you might just stop calling runs up the middle of the field because it might be futile to even try running in the middle of the field. Thinking back to the Pat Williams, Kevin Williams days, the Williams brothers in Minnesota, the Williams wall, like, you've got Davis and Clark, like, just absolutely good luck. I don't know what you do in that situation, especially trying to run in the middle of the defense. And the other plus here, very little wear and tear, only 900 snaps over the course of the last 4 seasons. Now, there are definitely some weaknesses with Jordan Davis as well. As I mentioned, only 900 snaps in the last 4 seasons. So not much wear and tear, but not a lot of experience, and he hasn't shown the ability. This isn't necessarily his fault. Georgia had a very deep defensive line, so there's a lot of rotations that go on here, but he's not somebody that had to play 40, 50, 60 snaps per game as he clearly would at the NFL level. It's a lot easier if you're coming in fresh to show that strength and that explosiveness and that agility. All of a sudden you're on snap 50, 60. What does that look like? We're not exactly sure because we haven't really had to see it with Jordan Davis. Again, 900 snaps in 4 seasons. That's incredibly, incredibly low. And a part of that, part of the next one is because of that, only 19 total pressures in 4 seasons. So what becomes the question here is, what's the ROI for more of a run defending defensive tackle? Now, I think he has the ability to become a better pass rusher. I think he has the ability to collapse the pocket. So even if he's not the one getting the sacks, Kenny Clark, Preston Smith, Rashawn Gary have a better chance to get sacks because he's, again, pushing the center of the guard back into the quarterback, which doesn't give him an ability to step up, which again makes everyone else's jobs easier. But the ROI potentially becomes less if he can't be a pass rusher himself. If you had to choose in the modern NFL, if you had a Wyatt who is a pass rushing specialist, maybe not as good against the run, or a Davis who's good against the run, but maybe not quite as much of a pass rushing specialist, most GMs would tell you they'd rather want the pass rushing specialist, which again makes this a very unique conversation. We talked about low man wins before. Well, at 6'6", makes it very hard to be the low man, and he can lose pad level, he can lose leverage, his technique's not always great. That's going to be something he has to be very cognizant of. It's not impossible. Look at Calais Campbell at 6'7", right? You can win at that size, but you have to become a ridiculously good technician because otherwise everyone else in the NFL on the offensive line is going to have a leverage advantage over you because they're going to be able to get lower than what Jordan Davis is going to be able to get lower with. He's got to develop more of a pass rush plan, and that's a move set, all of it. Like, it's just mostly size, speed, strength at this point. I'd like to see him play with a little bit more urgency at times. His change of direction isn't great. Again, we talked about the return on investment. They're like, is it worth it taking a guy in the top 15 that's going to be a primary run defender and who hasn't shown the propensity to be able to play 50, 60 snaps per game? That's why maybe, just maybe, he could fall into that 22 range where maybe Green Bay would have a chance to take him. 2 very different players here because of Kenny Clark's uniqueness. Either could potentially fit in Green Bay. If I had to guess, I do think they probably like Davis a little bit more, but neither would shock me. And again, I can't stress enough the importance of Kenny Clark here, not only for the ability to draft both of these guys, but I've been saying for years, like, you lose Kenny Clark for any period of time, you would love to have some insurance, and both, Wyatt and Davis would give Green Bay some insurance if Kenny Clark were to go out for any significant period of time. And talk about putting together an impressive group of defensive linemen. Imagine a defensive line that consisted of Kenny Clark, either Wyatt or Davis pairing with him, Dean Lowry, Jerron Reed, and TJ Slayton. That is the makings of a really, really good, really dominant defensive line, which makes things easier for your edge rushers, which makes things easier for Devonte Campbell and Chris Barnes, which makes things easier for your corners and safeties, etc. You start up front, you win with the defensive line, and it makes everyone else's job easier on the rest of the defense. Both would be great picks. We will see if either of them are even available at pick 22. It's certainly possible that they are not, but fun to think about the tandem with Kenny Clark and either one of these big University of Georgia defenders. That is going to do it for me today. Thank you so much for joining me. I always appreciate it. I'll be right back here tomorrow with, I believe, a breakdown of Chris Olave, so make sure to check that out. But until next time, and as always, go Pack Go.